Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Learning Unit 1.1, focusing the way to green corporate strategies in a period where ecological transition and decarbonization or circular economy play a key role in institutional and company strategies as well. In particular, my lecture today will provide you with an overview of the exogenous context as far as climate change is concerned, and on the possible answers given by companies to face with these new challenges. If we look at the agenda of this lecture, we will have a first section dealing with the exogenous context. So, why climate change is an issue, and how the picture has changed in the latest years. Then we will focus on some solutions, some evolutions in stakeholders' initiatives that allow us to be more optimistic about the possibility to face and to fight climate change. And finally, I will share with you 5 practical steps we have experienced at the group of Hera at introducing the concept of sustainability, circularity, decarbonization within our corporate strategy. And in this way, the aim of this lecture is to drive you through this journey and prepare your point of view for the next lectures focusing on risk management and other policy issues related to greening the strategies, but also greening the finance. Okay, after having introduced the way we will develop this lecture, now we can start by framing what is the issue. And the issue is now well known. The issue is climate change. I can tell you that if climate change is nowadays recognized as an issue, as a problem, that was not the case 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it was very disputed whether climate change would have been an issue and was fueled by anthropic actions. Now, if you look at the graph at the top side of the slide, we can see that the temperature of the planet has increased almost in a continuous way since the Industrial Revolution. And that is a proof that the change in Industrial Revolution, in using energy, in habits from consumers, has increased the level, the temperature of the planet, and therefore has fueled the global climate change. On the bottom side of the slide, you can infer a different message from this first slide, and that is the different contribution by areas in the globe to the increase of CO2 emissions. And we can say that since the 50s, I would say Europe and the US have increased a lot the emissions of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Then an increasing awareness of the issue has led EU and the US to stabilize their level, at least in the EU, but other countries such as China, such as India, have witnessed a fierce increase in emissions. And that is well known because developing countries which are targeting economic development are fueling their economic development by using energy, by burning fossil fuels as well. Now, let me show you how the issue is not related to carbon dioxide only. Carbon dioxide is the result, but causes can be found in almost every indicator on activities on the globe. And if we look at this set of indicators, you can spot world population has increased a lot in the last 70 years. You can see how the gross domestic product has increased in the same period, and a number of many more socio-economic trends. I can mention, for instance, the international tourism. That was something pretty unknown before the 50s, and nowadays it's almost normal despite this period of pandemic. On the other side of the graph, you can see different trends in Earth system indicator, and we can highlight the carbon dioxide, the nitrous dioxide, and the increase in methane emissions. All these trends support the increase in the temperature of the planet and in the climate change issue. But despite of greenhouse gases, you can also watch out about the acidification of the oceans or the erosion of the coast side. So what is scary on this pattern? It is very scary that these patterns have an exponential evolution. So day by day, year after year, the increase in the emission level, in the use of planet resources is higher and higher, and keep on growing year after year. So if we have a look at the risk coming from climate change as plotted in a Europe map, we can see that every different geographic area in Europe will face risk and threats coming from climate change. In this slide, we have highlighted the effects on the northwestern Europe and on the Mediterranean area, but the same with some differences would apply to other areas as well. And you can see that the northwestern area would be impacted by a sea level rise, which will translate in flood and intensity in precipitations, while the Mediterranean area will face drought and hot weather, and so actually the experiences of the different areas in Europe will be very different. But the common denominator is the climate change will create new threats to the population, to the companies, to the services that have to be provided, and to the institutions who are actually endowed to plan in advance how to cope with climate change. And the climate change needs a double fight, needs a fight today for decreasing the level of CO2 emissions and the increase in the global temperature. On the other side, it needs a second fight. I would say a fight for anticipating and mitigating the effects coming from climate change that will happen in the future. Indeed, even if we would be able to stop immediately the rise in carbon emissions, so even if we reached the climate peak today, some of the evolutions, some of the effects coming from the increase in temperature that have already occurred would translate in danger for the European continent. And I think of the sea level rise, which will happen anyway, even if the climate peak were reached immediately. Now, the world is facing not only an issue of climate change, is also facing the issue of overconsumption of natural resources. And in this respect, I like to show you the evolution of the Earth Overshoot Day in the last 50 years. What is the Earth Overshoot Day? The Earth Overshoot Day is a calculation made by the Global Footprint Network, and it represents the day of the year at which the yearly budget of natural resources has been fully used by the planet. And you can see that at the beginning of the 70s, this day was pretty close to the end of the year. That means at the beginning of the 70s, the planet was using its yearly budget in almost a year. And that was good. That was a sustainable pattern. And then the Earth Overshoot Day shifted continuously back on the calendar. And in 2019, we have set the Overshoot Day at the 1st of August. That means that the world has consumed in the first 7 months the yearly budget of natural resources. In other terms, the world is creating a debt of natural resourcing with the next generation year after year. If you look at the graph, you see the 2020 reveal an exception. On 2020, the day was on the 22nd of August. But remember, the 2020 was heavily impacted by the pandemic. So if we think at the effects of the pandemic, how much our activities have changed, how much the economic activities have slowed down, and all of that impressive change in 2020 allowed a release only of 20 days back in the calendar for the Overshoot Day. So this is a trend that has to be faced urgently to find different ways to exploit natural resources. And a solution on this respect is the circular economy, and we will come back to this point later on. Now, if you look at the small graph on the right of the slide, here some areas consumption pattern are depicted, and we can see that according to the consumption habits in the US, they would need 5 planets per year. According to the habits in Europe, we would need 3 planets a year. And on the bottom of the graph, we find India, which is actually exploiting less than its budget of resources, but will witness in the next years the most important increase in population on the globe. So it will not be able to keep that consumption pattern unless the world itself change consumption habits. Now, after this introduction on the issues of climate change and overconsumption, as I said, let's move our attention to other factors of the context that allow to be a bit more optimistic for the future if faced with the experience we have developed so far. In the latest years, have been developed some tools to address the climate change issue, and these tools can be grouped within the UN agenda. You probably know the 2030 agenda from the United Nations and the Sustainability Development Goals. The United Nations in 2015 introduced this framework, and the framework revealed to be effective to address not only climate change and overconsumption of resources, but social issues as well. Then we witness an increase in interest coming from financial institutions on climate change, on dimensions different than the financial and economic one. And here I think of environmental, social, and governance dimensions. that are grouped and called under the ESG definition. And finally, we have the technological evolution, digitalization, fast evolution, fast innovation is actually allowing companies and people to count on new techniques to change their behavior, to change their business model, and to react to the need for a change in the consumption of the resources of the planet. Plus, I would add, in Europe, we are facing an unprecedented political mood. We know that the Commission von der Leyen reacted after the pandemic, reacted after the economic slowdown by deploying a massive plan for new investments, and these investments will need to be dedicated to the Green Deal, to the digital transformation, and this will be a lever for giving more speed, for accelerating the ecological transition. Now, let's have a look at the Sustainable Development Goals. I don't think that I have to add too much because they are very well known. And the fact they are very well known is the proof that this framework from the UN has revealed to be very effective. Why it was so effective with respect to other framework used in the past which failed to bring on board different stakeholders? Well, first of all, you know that the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, are 17. And these SDGs, as I said, address not only the climate issue, but address all the issues and threats that are currently mining the development, a prosperous development of the planet. And in this slide, you see some objectives address the climate change, so that the biosphere dimension. Some other objectives instead address the society dimension, and here we can think of poverty, of gender discrimination, of instruction. And finally, there are also some SDGs addressing the economy itself. The economy itself as a tool for changing the way economy has functioned so far. So the first conclusion we can derive is this framework is functioning because it has matched different dimensions of analysis under the same framework: economic, social, and climate ones. Then the success of the Agenda ONU, of the UN 2030 objectives, can be traced back to the fact it has really involved a different group of stakeholders. The SDG framework is easy to be implemented, to be adopted, to be referred by companies, by institutions, by citizens as well. And the fact all stakeholders that need to be involved in this revolution can have the same framework to compare each other, to speak each other, is a powerful tool. You have probably noticed in how many different aspects of our lives the SDGs icons have started to come out. I saw them at airports, I saw them on companies' communication, and the local institutions as well refer to SDGs to frame their actions to the citizens. And last but not least, the European Commission, the new Commission, von der Leyen, has introduced the mandatory need for framing EU Commission actions under the SDG framework. and therefore you can see the importance of having the same language when facing an ambitious plan to change habits, to change economies, and to fight against global threats such as climate change. Now, let's move our reasoning a step further. This is the graph issued by the World Economic Forum every year. This is the 2021 picture, and the World Economic Forum depicts which are the main risks as perceived by companies, institutions, academics, NGOs, population in this ranking. And the graph shows on the x-axis the likelihood of the risk. On the y-axis it shows the impact of the risk. And of course the quadrant in the top right area summarizes the risks which are perceived as likely and having the highest impact. And if we look at this risk, 4 out of the first 5 top risks are related to environment, and you can see it due to the color of the spot on the graph. And if we go back 10 years ago, the same report would have emphasized only 1 climate risk out of 5 as being more likely, and 1 out of 5 being most impacting. Now the environmental risk, the climate risk, are unanimously recognized as those having the most likelihood and the highest impact for the world. And I can tell you that in this release, year 2021, infectious disease have climbed the ranking, being perceived as very likely and very impacting. But if you will have the time to see the report for 2019, the picture was different, and of course the experience of pandemic in the latest year has changed the way the population and the community in a broad sense perceive the threat of infectious disease. In 2020, think that all the top 5 risks as ranked by likelihood were related to the environment, to the climate. Why the risk dimension is so important? Because if the community is aware that climate is posing a risk to institutions, to companies, to citizens, well, the next obvious step is the finance institutions are also starting to ask for disclosure on climate risk. And this is what happened, for instance, with the TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. The TCFD has introduced some requirements for disclosing yearly in the company accounts the risk the company is facing due to the climate issue. And it really helps companies and stakeholders, financial stakeholders at most, to have an idea, to have a sensitivity on the impact coming from climate change on companies' account. This standard, the TCFD standards, is gaining market share in the biggest companies to be used within their accounts. But going a bit further, what do we mean by ESG? ESG is actually referring to three dimensions, which have become particularly interesting and important for the financial markets. The environmental one, and we have said a few words before to explain why this dimension has climbed to the top of the ranking. The social dimension. Therefore, the financial markets are trying to assess companies and their business plan, not only on the financial and economic dimension, but on the effects their actions, their projects will have on societies as a whole. And the final dimension to be taken into consideration is governance. So the way the company is organizing itself and playing its role within the territory. Now, this is a particularly important step change in the financial habits, as you can see that almost 3 out of 4 investors consider the ESG dimension a very important tool for addressing their funds. And why this awareness have increased in the latest years? Well, I can show you here with the graph on the right that it is commonly recognized that those companies which rank better in the ESG dimensions have also recorded better results in terms of financial results. And that is a great tool for investors. And actually, it is not that surprising if you consider that bearing in mind and having attention to the ESG dimensions actually can be translated into having a higher attention on long-term plans. And if a company is active in planning on a long-term basis, its result will also follow this pattern in the long term. Therefore, the ESG dimension is an interesting tool for rating agencies, investors, analysts, for measuring also the likely success of companies, not only on a short-term basis, but on a medium-long-term basis. And the long-term horizon is a key for addressing issues such as the climate change or the overconsumption of natural resources. Last but not least, the third factor that is allowing us to be a bit more confident on the future is the technological evolution. Now, we have witnessed first, second, third industrial revolution, and we are now experiencing a fourth industrial revolution, characterized by the use of Internet of Things, by the use of sensors, by the collections of data, by the analysis of this data to derive the best strategies and the best decisions thanks to artificial intelligence and so on. And this evolution is also allowing consumers to be more to be closer to companies' activities. It has also allowed for a new way of communicating between consumers and companies, and it can be a very important lever for bringing on the climate issue and finding new solutions. On this respect, I would like to show you that innovation wave have characterized every period of the last centuries. These are Kondratief cycles, and we can identify at least 5 cycles. The first was fueled by the steam engine, and then by the second by railway and steel. The third cycle was characterized by chemicals and electrification. And then we had a fourth cycle until the 70s related to cars and petrochemicals products. The latest contractive cycle we have experienced is the one related to to information technology, and it had place in between the 70s and the last decade. The next cycle will be a cycle probably characterized by environment and health. Environment due to the fact that we have to find a technological and digital way to answer to the climate issue. Health, because as we all know, the COVID experience showed the whole planet how important it is to invest and to research on a new way for dealing with health and preventing the next pandemic. Now we can focus on the third part of this lecture, and that is the part, as I said, in which I will provide you with 5 simple steps to include in a corporate strategy dimensions such as sustainability, such as circular economy, or decarbonization as well. And it is easy when you think of deploying your strategy. It is quite easy to link strategy and sustainability. But the key here is to build up a structure allowing companies to pursue sustainability targets together with economic ones. And we will see how. So here are the 5 steps. Let's have a look. The first step relates to the company's mission. The second step relates to its drivers. A third step involve rewarding schemes within the company. A fourth step it's referred to reporting activities, and finally any activity for increase the engagement of people, of HR, of stakeholders. Now, the first step for matching sustainability and strategy is to include sustainability in the core mission of the company. So that the sustainability should answer the question why. Why your company is providing services, is producing goods. What is the reason why your company exists? And if you manage to provide an answer including sustainability to this silly question, it will help a lot to include sustainability dimension in your strategy. Indeed, if we look at some numbers, you can see that it's almost unanimously recognized that sustainability is important. But when it comes to creating a strategy, only 6 out of 10 managers recognize they have included explicitly sustainability in their company strategy. And when it comes to showing concrete actions made by companies for promoting sustainability, only 1/4 of the respondents to this poll had business cases suitable for being a case for sustainability. Therefore, the first step is to include sustainability in the core mission of a company. Then we have experienced that a second step was to develop a new framework, a new driver for the company. Gruppo Hera had a framework referring to CSR, corporate social responsibility, and the corporate social responsibility actually was focusing on what and how, and it represented some kind of ex post reporting to frame all the actions your company was able to develop to answer as well to sustainability needs. With a CSV framework, the Creating Shared Value framework, we actually changed a lot in this point of view. Indeed, this is quite an active approach. So your aim become to find those initiatives, those projects that allow the company to pursue their economic target, I would say their margins, and at the same time allow the community, allow the territory to pursue their sustainability target. And we can mention environmental or social targets as well. The CSV framework is actually more keen to answer the why question, because it moves your habit from a reconstruction ex post of the sustainable side of your activities to a design ex ante of the sustainability characteristics that have to be found in your business model and your projects. And that has really helped a lot Gruppo Hera to make a step onwards on this respect. Third step, you need a good tool to measure your progress. Peter Drucker was saying, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Meaning that in the business environment, within a company, it is utmost important to measure performances and to measure any kind of improvement. And this is the case for sustainability performances as well. And that is why we also have developed a CSV tool for measuring year after year the quota of our gross margin that is responding to the CSV framework as well. And that measure allowed Gruppo Hera in a few years to move swiftly from a share of 33% to a share almost close to 50% in our new business plan. Well, linked to the issue of measuring, there is the issue of rewarding, of giving incentives to the people who are working in your company. And of course, if you can measure something, you can also build up incentive schemes and rewards for addressing the actions of the different top managers and the different directions of the company. So measuring is also an enabler of rewarding schemes. As a fourth step, we arrive at the communication issue. It is important to communicate to your stakeholders, to your workers, to your shareholders, your commitment to the sustainability dimension. And communication can be let's say, classic one, focusing on what you have done to answer to sustainability issues. But you need actually to evolve to a communication based on how and why. And here we can point to what we have already said about the mission of the company. And it is important to stress the stakeholders' need to perceive your commitment in terms of why, in terms of the reason moving the company to pursue sustainability, social, environmental targets as well. And how? So being very transparent on the way you will promote these new dimensions together with your economic and industrial growth targets. Finally, we have the fifth step necessary for matching strategy and sustainability in your company, and that is leverage on technology and people engagement. Technology, we have already said, it will play a key role on promoting new business models, new plans for improving the way we produce goods and services, for promoting a circular economy, for instance, for developing new production possibilities based on the eco-design of the products. On the other side, we have the engagement coming from people, and people can be engaged in many different ways. Consumers can be engaged thanks to behavioral economics and nudges. We have experienced how habits for consuming energy can change if consumers are provided with some more information on their consumptions compared with those of their neighbors or comparable families. And as well with the engagement of employees. Working for a company that has a clear vision, a clear purpose for its activities, and a purpose which is consistent with the key challenges coming from the exogenous context, for sure is a tool for motivating people, for retaining talents within the company, and for drawing a pattern of growth for the company on a long-term basis. So thanks a lot for your attention. I hope this first lecture can be a good starting point for your further readings and listening at the Grandfin course.